You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Well, hello, friends. I have a super fun thing to share with you today. Special episode, if you will. So here's the story. Some people have been asking for more of me on the show. True story. I've actually been approached by somebody who's like, when are you going to be on the show? It seems funny to me, interesting, because I feel like there's a ton of me in the show. I'm focusing on less of me in the interviews, more of the guests, because it's about them. But anyway, in a twist or a flip on the famous sentence about customers always being right, I'm going to go ahead and say the audience is always right. And so if this is what is requested, I think that's a great idea. I do happen to think that it can be a little boring or bland or blah if it's an episode that's just me talking about myself, talking about my ideas. I mean, I can do it. I can talk to myself for a very long time, but I came up with an idea of me being the guest on my own show. I know, that's crazy, right? So I went into a group of podcasters that I know and I say, hey, would anybody like to interview me for my show? And ta-da, bing, bang, boom. Some people said yes. And here we are. So I met Raquel Sands. She agreed to interview me. What are we going to talk about? My favorite subject, me. Just kidding. We talk about the show. Where the idea came from, what's working and what's maybe not. What do I hope it will become? Where do the guests come from? And all the things that maybe you are or maybe you're not curious about. I am going to tell you a little bit more about Raquel in a second. The original idea was that this would release as the 100th episode, but it didn't come together quite as fast as I thought it would. I tend to think that things will happen faster than they might. So this is actually releasing in sequence as the 128th interview of the show. I think it's the 140th episode that's recorded. Podcast, sequential math. Doesn't make sense outside of the space of my own brain. For today's episode, I'm the guest. And the host is Miriam Raquel Sands. Miriam Raquel Sands is a career strategist turned self-trust coach. She's a podcast host and the creator of A Work of One's Own and A Day in the Life. She helps purpose-driven, emotionally aware millennials and Gen Z professionals redefine what success looks like without toxic hustle or spiritual bypassing. Her work blends trauma-aware coaching, nervous system literacy, communication strategy, and storytelling to help clients reclaim self-trust, alignment, and capacity. And I'll put the information on how to connect with Raquel in the show notes. So you'll find that there. But are you ready to learn more about me and why I do what I do and all the backstory and secret stuff? I know you are. Let's do it.
And we're doing this. Oh my goodness.
I feel I'm here for the ride. All right. You're in control.
I'm in control. And I'm someone who is very spontaneous. So we will just go for this ride. I am Raquel Sands. For those of who nobody knows me, unless maybe you have Googled me. And I met Amy through the Feminist Podcast Collective. So we are swapping seats. I will be interviewing her on her fabulous, awesome podcast in this milestone, 100 episodes. So we'll get into all of that. But I don't know. I can introduce myself. I am a career strategist. I help people find their purpose, find their path in these chaotic, ungrounded times. So just to level set, but everybody should know Amy, or hopefully you're on the right spot.
Yeah, but usually I'm the one that's asking the questions. Today I'm going to be the one answering the questions. So
Yeah.
and so that's what we're doing today, and I'm excited to do it. I'm just going to keep saying that over and over and pretend that it doesn't go against every cell in my body to take over and start asking questions.
Oh no. Well, I'm happy to answer questions too if that brings the comfort level. But I wanted to start with the origin story because I listened to your podcast and I was trying to pick some like weave what is the mosaic and all of this that you've created. And so just kind of to start, why did you start this podcast or this format? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this falls under one of the reasons that I think it's a great idea to do this because this is something that I feel like I've talked about a lot in some spaces, but maybe not directly to the audience that's listening.
Okay.
So, where did it come from? So, the idea for the art of imperfect adulting started bouncing around in my head probably, well, we're going to say a year and a half to 2 years ago. And it was just this sort of concept that had two pieces.
Mm,
One, that I was ready to speak to a more broad-based group of people. I had been working directly with step parents for about 5 years. Always will love them, but I never wanted to launch a group program or a community that was exclusive to step parents, which melds very much with how our connection is. I just am a person where I like to open doors and be inclusive and invite people to the table. And anytime I find myself in a spot saying, I'm just going to do this for this group. I'm just going to
yeah.
do this for this label. It doesn't always vibe with me. So
Yeah.
that was one thing that was going on. And the
Mm.
other thing that was going on was that I was beginning to notice at the ripe old age of my 50s, now that I can say that I'm wise and, in the second half of my life,
Yeah.
hopefully, is that some of the solutions
Mm.
that I would use for different things, I could reapply them for
Mm.
different questions.
Mm.
So maybe I had searched for a strategy in my 20s for career getting a job,
Yeah.
and then I was reapplying that in something else in my 50s,
Yeah.
or I would find myself taking something from a hobby of my life and reapplying it to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I began to have this sort of sensation that maybe what I wanted to talk about was sort of the question behind the question, or the tool behind the tool. So instead of talking to people about one very, very specific
Okay.
question and solution, is
Mm.
there a thread that ties this longer journey together? And
Yeah.
so for me, that became
Mm.
the choices we make, the changes we go through,
Yeah.
and a bunch of different things. And for some reason, that ties into imperfection for me,
Yeah.
leaning into the idea that we can't wait to be perfect to start, that imperfection is a starting point.
Mm.
And so that is the really loosey goosey
Yeah.
origin story. It was a very, very vague and nebulous concept for a long time. I put a call out to my friends and I tried to explain this to 100 different people before I launched the show.
Oh my gosh.
And at least 50 of those people in the beginning were like, we do not understand what you're talking about, Amy.
Oh
So
no.
it took me a while to get it
Get it. Yeah.
to a place where it was something I could describe to people and that made sense.
Yeah. I mean, now I feel like just reading the name of the podcast, The Art of Imperfecting, or the art, or maybe that's my own ad lib, the art of my own Freudian slip. But the art, I think, is so meaningful because it's not about figuring things out necessarily. Art is a very subjective and not containment, and then imperfect adulting. Like it's so I love that. So I want to kind of pick why podcasting as the format versus a blog or a video or I don't know. I mean, I
Oh, good question.
yeah.
That is a good question. One of the easy answers is I had done it before.
Okay.
I had done a podcast in 2016, so I knew the basic tech stuff of how to do it.
Yeah.
The other true answer to that is that this is a way for me to, and this is technology, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I can bring in an interview from the podcast in 2025 and use tech to transcribe it and turn it into a bunch of things. And so, it's easier for me to find people that I can interview on an audio podcast, an audio video show,
Yeah.
than to ask people to write articles. And
Yeah.
so it was a broader base. It was an easier reach for me.
Okay. And then the how how did you feel a resonance with those words? I mean, I think you said a little bit imperfection, but how did you, and then even landing on that word, I think as a in the business world or in marketing, it's hard to sit with certain words and certain frameworks. So, I mean,
Yes.
I'm curious, how did you birth the naming and all of these things.
So the piece of the art is absolutely what you said, that I think that when we're getting advice for life stuff, very little of it is math, right? I mean, sometimes it is, right? But if you're talking about money, some of it's math.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that when we're talking about whether or not we should go to graduate school or whether we should be accountants or whether we should get married or divorced or do any of those things, whether we should move to Miami,
Yeah.
um, that's all very nuanced and personal. And so that's where the art came from.
Okay.
And then adulting has its roots in sort of the jokes that would go around that I would see over the years that were
Okay.
like, am
Yeah.
I the adult in the room? Like, am I supposed to know how to be an adult? Like, when does the adulting handbook show up?
That's
And
funny.
one of my favorites is the realization, which happened to me early as a step parent, where
Mm.
I would be standing around and I would realize that people were coming to me for the answers. And I was looking over my shoulder, like, wait a second, I need an adultier adult. I don't know what I'm doing. And so that's where I went. And then one of the things that I've definitely shared in a variety of places is that I was, it is harder to say the art of imperfect adulting than I would have realized. And
Mm.
so I maybe should have picked something that was a little more melodious. But when I told my young adult daughter the title of the show, she said, well, that's very millennial of you, Mom.
Oh,
And I'm not a millennial, I'm Gen X. So
yeah.
I thought that was really funny. But yeah, yeah. But
My gosh. Yeah, talking about like the broad strokes. I mean, I think this just resonates, hits all the chord. I'm a millennial. I just turned 33 a couple weeks ago and feeling like, what does it even mean to categorize ourselves in certain generations and certain everything is just so overlapping. I think all of us in so I love that because it like you said, the broad strokes positions you to speak to. I love how you said it's not about the tool, it's like the why. And
yes,
one of my questions was going to be, were you in, if you're comfortable sharing, a particular life moment or season that started getting you to think about the why or your why or I think you shared maybe a little bit, but I don't know if
sure.
going back a little bit.
So, I mean, definitely if you were to rewind to me in my teens and my 20s, I was a person who was very, very focused on present day and just solving the situation that was right in front of me. I wasn't great
Yeah.
at planning too far forward, and I was avoiding analyzing my past at any and all costs.
Mm,
I was very much a survival type person, and that was how I made my decisions. But there have been several things, which I think many of us go through, where you become sort of introspective about your life and figuring out the patterns and the cycles that are happening within your family, within your own personal life, within the mistakes and things that we repeat.
mm,
And so definitely those things have happened to me over time that
mhm,
have caused me to be, you know, to be thoughtful of it. The other thing is that I have arrived at this amazing time in my life where people are calling it midlife. And
mm.
I have this weird knee-jerk like aversion to that word, which makes no sense. This is just me. I'm not saying
Okay.
it's a bad word or it's a bad concept, but
Yeah.
every time somebody wants to put me in the box of midlife, I'm like,
Mm,
am I in the middle? Am I gonna live to, like, where is the end? How do we know?
right.
And the other thing that was going on was that within midlife, which you have not gotten there yet, so you're
No,
not inundated with this yet,
no.
is that people begin to talk to you about reawakening and
Mm,
reimagining and reinventing.
mm,
And that also had me, I was like, I'm not redoing anything. Like, I don't have any desire to go back and do to be 25. It was great, really
right,
liked it, but
right.
also I was broke then and now I'm not. And so I want to do some of the things that I maybe took a pause from for a while to do other parts of my life, like raise kids, but it's not going back to what I was. And
Mm,
so those things were bouncing around in my head. And I was like, and I wanted to sort of focus on the fact that it's a journey of adulthood.
yeah.
And that when we silo these things into millennial, Gen X, or 20s, 30s, 40s, or this is your period of being a parent or not being a parent, which is another demographic split that I think doesn't always do us a lot of favors, right?
Right.
Is then you're creating as many problems as you might not be. And there are these amazing times in my own life
Mm.
where I knew that I had gotten very, very helpful answers for things in my life from very unexpected places. And these are places where the lines cross all the boundaries.
Yeah.
And so, I would have one of the stories that I tell frequently is about telling my children, the younger children and my stepchildren, about when my dad died, and I got advice from my exterminator that happened to be in my house.
Okay.
And that's not who you would think to ask. It's not who I asked. I
Yeah.
had plastered
Mm.
the city of Miami, hiring everybody who would give me an answer with professional advice
Mm.
and strategizing how to have these conversations and all of these things,
Mm.
very focused on a couple of pieces that were not actually right. Like I had this concept in my mind that I was the only person I knew who had gone through this,
Right.
and that therefore I didn't know who to ask.
Right.
And I
Right.
had this other concept, which was that if I studied it and asked doctors and psychiatrists
Mm.
and therapists enough, that
Yeah.
they were the people who would tell me how to do it. And they were very helpful. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to say that they weren't helpful,
Right.
but I had pages and pages of notes and a
Mm.
lot of internal stress about I needed to do this right. So two of the kids were still very young, and like I had this idea that I was going to mess it up if I screwed it up.
Mm.
So, long story short, the doorbell rings or knocks, and I have two little kids at home. It's a very big deal for little kids when people come to the house. Very exciting. They go
Ah.
running up to the door, and I open the door, and this is somebody they know, and they come running up, and they're like, "Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Did you know that my grandpa died?"
Oh.
And I freeze like a deer in the headlights. I've got all this pressure. I'm sweating about that we get this right. And I've got the information. And here is this very, very kind man who it just looks right down and puts his hand on the shoulder of my very young kid and just says, I heard. That's sad, isn't it?
Oh.
And my kids look up at him and smile and run off and do the next thing that they were doing. And it
Mm.
was an inaction, like he did what everybody had been telling me to do. Answer the question honestly, keep it simple,
Ah.
meet them on their level, expect that they're going to, bring it back up. Don't get overly emotional. But I had spent all this time trying to get it right. He just gave me a very, very simple, quick example.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have so many of these where it's like, I don't need to be an expert in the topic of
Right.
grief and children. What I need is an example from somebody of how they've done it and how they've walked it. And we get that very often by crossing the lines across age groups, across hobbies, across genders, across all of these things. And so that's an example of my own imperfection, sure, but also the type of conversations that I was hoping to offer,
Wow.
and the stories that I was hoping to find. Like, tell me how you learned these things, tell me how you did these things.
Wow, wow. There was so much there, but what called out to me was this, at least for me, maybe this says something about me, is this feeling of being an expert. I feel like
Yeah.
that somehow an adult means now you know all these things and now you have to fulfill all these expectations and you meet the bar and then you keep raising the bar, whether that's with children or with caretaking or in jobs or whatever it is. And I think it's so unfortunate because there's no time or space or energy or resources to be an expert in ourselves, let
Right.
alone in
How
anything else.
Right. Very strangely, being a child doesn't prepare you to parent
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
Living in the same house with your parents who are married, if you have married parents in your house, doesn't prepare you for your own marriage in any way, that I've figured out. Although my parents were divorced, so maybe I'm a bad candidate for that.
Oh.
But the other thing is that,
Mm.
and this idea I borrow from a guy named Gabor Mate, who wrote a book called The Myth of Normal, and he talks about
Mm.
how in modern times we have really transferred authority and expertise to institutions and not just people. So, and he talks about even with buildings, he's like, so, we assume that anybody in the hospital is an expert qualified
Mm.
to take care of us.
Wow.
And a lot of times that's true, right? A lot of times that's true. The guy driving the plane has been vetted and he's got the expertise, and I'm not double checking it when I get on the airplane.
Right, right, right.
I trust that process.
Yeah.
But the backside of that is that we sometimes devalue the experience of the just people who are hanging out around us. They got my exterminator. I don't know if he has some past history where he had grief training, but
Mm,
what I realized shortly after that is that I was so focused on my age that I forgot that, of course, all the older people in my circle
yeah.
had already lived that part of their life, and I could have asked them, "Hey, you guys, what do you know about, what do you recommend for me? What can you, how
Yeah.
can you help me with this process?" So
Mm,
it's the idea of balancing out and rewarding and honoring and raising up the voices of people
yeah.
based on lived experience.
Yeah, wow. And that's beautiful because that's so hard is creating the space. And I was gonna ask, have you come up with or encountered guests that maybe you didn't agree with their perception or the way they view things or anything challenging? And then I guess the flip
Yeah.
side, have you adopted that or how has that challenged your your mentality? Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a great question, right? Because one of the things that I was very careful about is,
Mm.
or that I thought about is, I don't actually intend for this to be the Amy show. It's not
Okay.
my ideas and my philosophies that I'm putting out into quite the opposite, actually, because I only have one of the reasons to go out and find people to interview is because I only have my very limited set of experiences. And I've done a lot of amazing things in my life, but it's still only the story of one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be really helpful to a bigger group of people, it is the value of finding somebody. Like, I'm not a millennial, so to find a millennial perspective, I'd have to find somebody and ask you to share it. I was
Yeah.
talking to somebody earlier today about the fact that
Mm.
with lockdown, we all experienced it, but it actually is very different what we experienced depending on where we were and how old we are and what was going on in our life. So
Yeah.
that's sort of the thing with that. So, with that in mind, I really do think there's a lot of benefit to be able to share experiences and viewpoints that don't align with mine,
Mm.
and there have been some. So there have definitely been some. There's been at least one person who probably has a pretty, it comes through in the episode. She's got a very strong opinion about vaccinations that
Okay.
is different than the decision I make in my own personal life. And we actually talk about that. And we talk about
Wow.
how she made her decision. And and I hope I did a good job
Yeah.
bringing that together because I think that there's tremendous value in being able to share differing opinions in a way where you can see how people got
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And so there's not a ton of them that have happened, but there definitely are some.
Mm.
So there's an anti-vax one, there's people who've had experience in their life that I probably wouldn't have done the same way if it was me, but we're not really talking about what I would do.
Yeah.
And then the one that comes up more often is people have experiences that I just have never had.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
asking them to share something, and I just don't even, I don't even know where to begin or know what they're talking about. I interviewed a woman who drives an Amish taxi. She's an Amish taxi driver. I didn't even know what that was. That's the
Yeah.
reason I wanted to hear the story. I was like, what does this mean?
Me.
Um, and so, we talk a lot about, or we hear a lot about the polarization of media and opinions right now in modern society, I guess, or modern media.
Yeah.
Whatever I can do to be a person who allows for two different opinions to be safely shared, I
Yeah.
think that's good because at the end of the day, I don't really want to tell people what I think they should do. I really do want to give people a differing perspective so that they can make their own decisions. But that's not to say that I don't worry about it. I
Yeah.
do worry that somebody will hear me have a guest on the show and they will think that I align with it or that I agree with it. And that's just part, I mean, I just had to swallow that and say, I will
Yeah.
cross that bridge if and when we come to it.
Yeah. Oh my, and that was going to lead me to another question is how do you handle or what has worked or what hasn't worked in terms of the visibility? Like what has helped you in engaging in those spaces where for the most part it sounds like it's been everything kind of going well, but in the challenging or the things that maybe holding the dissonance, what has helped you when you're creating this visibility for yourself or for the
Yeah.
topic? Yeah.
So visibility is a thing. So when you become more visible,
Mm.
people then have opinions about what they see about you, and that is a little bit weird. So like I'm not famous, right? I'm not. I'm just me still. But it is. There are people out there that they know who I am. I will run into people who I haven't seen for a long time, and they will talk to me about things because they hear on the podcast.
Oh my
It's a
God.
very, very interesting
Wow.
experience to have because they're having a relationship with me that I am both a part of and also not a part of.
Not part of, yeah.
And so that's really interesting. The I am very conscious of the fact that it's my production and I'm a big part of it, but the show and the company and the business, they're actually very different than Amy Stone, right? So I'm a part of it, but there is a difference. And
Mm.
even though I have a public facing persona,
Yeah.
right? Like, so there's big pieces, like there's stories that I tell, like there's stories that I tell over and over again that I know are out there. There's also pieces of my life that I keep
Mm,
separate. And I try and have that boundary
mm,
for myself. And I think that that's how I'm stepping into that and trying to work with that. It's fun. Talk to me when the audience is 10 times the size it is now. I'll have a different perspective than I do today. But that's how I'm sort of balancing it because I'm okay. I
mm,
love the fact that people have different opinions and different ways of looking at the world. I think
yeah.
that's really one of the great things about the human experience.
Yeah.
And there is a line, right? There absolutely is a line there where if somebody came and was, had a position on the show that I didn't feel like I could reconcile, or
Mm,
I thought that they were using the platform in a way that was harmful,
mm,
that I would probably make a different decision. But when if I talk to somebody about a belief that they have or a decision they've made for their own life,
yeah.
they're really just talking about their experience. And I think that that can be helpful even and entertaining, even if we don't agree with it.
Right. Yes. No, that's so important because there's I think a YouTube channel or something that I sometimes well it's blanking out, but they bring the kind of
Yeah.
polarity together. And I think that it speaks volumes about how to hold that space because that also isn't a manual of how to hold the binaries and have it be both and not either or.
Yes.
Um what has helped you, I guess, behind the scenes? Maybe we get into a little bit of the the technicality. Do you have a framework of either a mental or a logistical of either vetting or for your own, what's the boundary? Or yeah, I don't know, anything like that that
So yeah, well, the process, the way it works, like people pitch their ideas
okay,
and I review them. I take about 1 out of 10 pitches.
okay,
The majority of them that don't come through are just because they're not on topic.
okay.
So I say this is the theme of the show, choices and changes, personal stories, and people will submit things that are
Yeah.
clearly not personal stories. They're like, I would like to talk about, founding my business. And I'm like, okay, I'm sure that's a great story. That's just not the story I tell. Go pitch Guy Raz.
Right, right.
And then there are some people who, when they pitch their story, they seem maybe like they're too close to it still, because that is something that I watch for is that they're actually, I think that, and I will put this in my own lens of my own experience,
Yeah.
so that I'm not putting it on anybody else. If I am very, very fresh to an experience and I'm going to tell you about it, my
Mm,
emotions are closer, my advice is more personal,
yeah.
versus if I'm talking about something that happened and I'm all the way through it. And then
Yeah.
I can very, much more neutrally say, this is what happened, this is how I did it, and this is how I think it can help you.
Yeah.
And so when people pitch things that seem very emotional and very still going on,
Mm.
those sometimes I steer away from because they're not quite ready to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really and I guess a follow-up, is it easy to tell or I don't know if somebody has if it's not fresh enough, but it's kind of a returning to that. I'm thinking of like a callus or something that
Oh, no, I don't think I would know that. I don't think
okay.
I would know that. Like it does, it's easier than you would think
Yeah.
when people are hyper emotional about it because their
Mhm.
pitches are very emotional.
Okay.
Let me tell you the story of the troubles in my life, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound like it's quite over yet.
Yeah.
Versus when somebody's like, yeah, here's something I experienced, and here's how I worked through it. So
Right.
it's just, because this is a little tiny form,
Yeah.
2 or 3 sentences, and that's all you get.
Okay.
So I would not have known
Mm,
how quick I could make that decision, and I probably don't always get it
yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And any advice? This was another part of my questions. Any advice for people who are curious to pitch or want to share to someone who might want to pitch? Any, I don't know, best practice or so.
So, no, that's a great question, actually. So, it's different on different shows, but the number one thing is for sure, pay attention to what the show is actually about.
Okay.
Um, and I mean, because I get some that I'm like, wow, I don't even, I don't even know why because it takes, even
Mhm.
if you go all the way through it, you're talking 10, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know, the five
Wow.
minutes of your life to fill it out. And when
Yeah.
it doesn't match at all, I'm always like, wow, that's okay, that's interesting. But
Yeah.
and people say that all the time. And you go on any podcast forum and they're going to say, do this. And I've done what I can to make it really, really clear. Like, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, because we're telling stories.
Yeah.
So the more clearly defined the story is,
Mhm.
the more appeal it usually has. And that just goes with experience and with practice.
Yeah. Anything that has, I don't know if surprised is the word, but looking back, any standouts, I guess, moments in this moment? I mean, maybe if I ask you,
In the guesting process, the biggest surprise is how many people have wanted to be on the show.
wow.
That has been a really, really, so that was definitely a question, would there be people, would my theme make sense? Would anybody understand what I was talking about? And then would anybody want to tell their story and be a guest on the show? And
Mhm.
that has been a lot of fun to see that so many people are
Oh,
interested in telling their story. That has been the biggest surprise.
wow.
There are people who will tell very personal stories, and there are people who are very kindly saying how they think it's helpful to hear other people's stories and to share
Oh,
the stories. And so that feels good.
yeah. I don't know if this comparison is, well, I'll just say it, but it feels like a chicken noodle soup for the soul.
Oh yeah, chicken soup for the
Chicken.
soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
I remember those books growing up, and this may not be that, but just what reminds me is, or what comes to mind for me is just the breadth, the depth of
yeah,
all the different sort. And it's hard to find that now because there's so much coming at us from different spots, but it's not necessarily a mirroring effect or a safe space.
yeah.
Uh, so I love that. Any surprises in terms of stories that you could have never imagined hearing? Like the Amish taxi for me is that's
Amish taxi, 100%. Yeah, no, I love hearing all the variety of stories, and I've really enjoyed that part of the process. So there's been lots of stories that have surprised me. And they're all out there, so people can like listen to them.
yeah.
I do a lot of stories about career change, which I think is so helpful because
Mm,
even today, I think a lot of people, I would love to tell you that I don't think the 21-year-olds of the world
mm,
still feel this pressure, but we do feel pressure that we're supposed to pick a
right.
career and choose it forever, which
Right.
matches very few people's lived experience.
No.
And so the more of those stories that
Mhm.
there are, the more supportive it is. So most of the people I interview are women, and most of the people listening are women. But
Mhm.
I interviewed a guy whose name is Nathaniel Ramsey. He
Mhm.
was a concert musician, like a symphonic musician, like
Oh
some
my God.
professional musician, and
Oh,
he shifted his career to he is an aviation instructor. So he became a
wow.
pilot and a pilot instructor. This gets better. So then we're having this conversation about why he made this change and all of these things, and he goes through and he explains to me what these two careers have in common.
Oh my
And
God.
that to me was really surprising because, and I even said to him, I was like, never in a million years would I have been able to draw that line of how these two things had
Wow.
anything in common. But I mean, he's right. He's living it. These are the
Yeah,
things they have
yeah.
in common. And so that was really interesting to me to see that because that
Wow.
is something that when you have a broad base, when you have
Mhm.
a life that bounces around, and you feel like you don't fit into the LinkedIn formula of tell
Oh,
me your history, right? I am
yeah,
beginning to wonder if anybody actually feels like they fit into that spreadsheet. But,
yeah.
there is a through line of how did you get from here to there?
Yes,
So the person who's living it can
yes,
connect the dots. And
yeah,
so hearing somebody else do that, I hope is helpful because
yes.
we tell people we're reinventing or we're doing, and these are fine. There's nothing wrong with this, or second chapter, or next chapter, or the next level, or however we want to tell ourselves. But
Right.
they're connected. Like we don't go. It's not usually. Actually, I'd love to hear a story of someone who it was totally different.
Wow.
But even if you go back to school, say I read a story today in the newspaper of
Yeah.
somebody who went back to law school and took the bar when they were 70 years old,
Wow.
it's still connected. Whatever he did before that, which I didn't even pay any attention to, so I can't share that part of the story,
Yeah.
is a part of his journey.
Yeah. No, that's exactly, I feel like in the nutshell of going back to the title, The Art of Imperfect Adulting, because adulting just, I feel like it's a cyclical thing. It's not like
I
we've,
think it probably is. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I think it's iterative for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and that whole concept of the linear or a binary or whatever it is, like for me, what been coming up as a career person.
Right. Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. No, yeah. I talked on I don't remember someone else's podcast or maybe in the podcast collective that we're both a part of, that I used to have a lot of shame around the word job hopper. And
Yes.
yeah, and it's like why we're already trying to do whatever it is adults do, and then to add the emotion and the mental fatigue and expectations, and so it gets hard to make the decision to feel connected, to do all the things. I'm gonna check out those podcasts. I haven't listened to those other episodes, but
Yeah, no, do
that's
check them out.
fantastic.
It's one of the most popular things that people want to talk about, which I think directly connects to the fact that the people who go through it
Yeah.
feel the stress of going through it enough that they want to share it with other people who are doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that the problem solving process for a person
Yeah. Yeah.
reinventing their career is probably very similar to a kid who's picking their major in school. Um,
Mm,
like, so any of those transitions, I think there's overlapping things. And I think that bizarrely, we probably do a very bad job of getting people ready for that.
yeah. I was gonna say, have you noticed any common themes throughout this season of the podcast or not, and what might be
Oh,
missing?
yeah. So career change is a
Okay.
very common topic. There's 8 categories. So I actually go through and sort everything into 8 categories. And the two most popular that are pitched, because that's how things are organized, are the career change and then the relationship change.
Wow.
So
Mm.
those are the two in a whole variety of things. Like, so I've got stories about people who stayed in their relationship, people who ended their relationship for a variety of reasons, and for different things with parents, with children, with spouses, with whomever. Yeah, all kind of things like that.
Wow. And I guess what is that through line maybe show around us as humans in this day and age that what is career, which for me, at least for me, I remember when I was starting, I was like, what's my purpose? What's my
Yeah.
thing? And then the same with the relationship. What does it mean to have a soulmate or the forever? And so there's these big things. And then anything I guess that's on the flip side missing or that you would like to see or that you haven't seen as much that
I
would be.
think that they're all coming through. Like, I mean, people are pitching things. It is, I mean, there are stories that people probably don't want to tell publicly, which makes
Mm,
absolute sense.
mm,
And the show is growing every day, and so there's more visibility. So, like, there are probably people who are cautious about coming to tell their story because of the visibility of then it will be out there. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there is a story behind all of those questions about change,
Yeah.
which comes up in a lot of things, which is, what is it saying about me? Like, what is it saying about who I am and my worth based on how I make these decisions?
Yeah.
And I think that there are people who do tell the stories from that perspective. I
Yeah.
went more pragmatically because I think it's easier to problem solve and to identify with when we talk about the change we make and the decision
Right.
than to jump right into with a stranger. Let's talk about
Mm.
my deep search for my personal identity as I
Yeah.
went through this relationship change. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that I feel like if I was that person receiving, I would feel a little. Well, I'm also very. I feel I'm. I hope I've gotten comfortable with peeling back the layers because I think that's one
Yeah.
of the hardest things of being an adult, of being a human. Since we've been so dressed up and layered and masked. But I love the pragmatism because I think that gets to the core, or at least some part of it is we're all trying to problem solve all the time.
We're all trying to problem solve all the time. And if there is a part of this journey where you get there and you don't have to do that, I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's a power tool. It's like, if you are holding out that you will figure it out and there will never be a time where you're not asking questions, I think
Mhm.
that, at least in my case, I think you can make yourself a little bit miserable. Like you end up in it. Like, I mean, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And then what is if there is a feeling or a thought that you have wanted people to take away from either certain episodes or just the season of the podcast as it is now, has that changed
Oh,
what is
that's a good question. So I did, and I may have told you this at other times. I try and tell people that I tried to keep a very open mind that I had this idea and to see what it would grow into and what people wanted.
yeah.
Because I think that if I had had a very, very tight vision of what I wanted it to be, I could have squished it into making it into something that it wasn't. So
Yeah.
I didn't know what it would become. But what I hoped it would be, I
Mm,
find it very, very helpful
mm,
to hear stories from people who have done the thing that I think I want to do, and they did it.
wow.
I
Yeah.
think that's very helpful, right? It's like, oh, I want to run a marathon. Oh, look, there's somebody else who did it. Great. At
Yeah.
least somebody else did it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to provide that like sort of place to get
Mm,
um, support and
mm,
validation.
mm.
And then my hope is that it would be entertaining
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
fun to listen to, but also inspiring and motivating for people to be able to go and do the things that maybe they're thinking they're not sure that they can do because there's so many times where, I mean, so when I was 21, I moved across the country, right? Like, right. And not everybody does that. You don't
Yeah.
have to do it. But
Right.
if you're sitting in a room thinking, oh, should I do it?
Yeah.
And you hear the story of somebody who did do it, then great. I have at least two interviews with people who moved across the globe and they don't even speak the language, which is definitely a thing I didn't do.
Oh, yeah. Same.
But they did, and so it can be done. And I think that those are fun stories to hear. And I hope that people will be, I hope they enjoy them and that it inspires them to just do things that are part of making their own life the next best version of themselves that they can.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because the groundedness, we could all
Right.
see it on TV or movies, but it
Oh, yeah. Because I don't think it's inspirational necessarily to hear that some billionaire has shot themselves into space. Like, if they invited me to go in
Right.
this rocket, I don't know if I would go. I'm definitely not signing up to go to Mars. I don't have any interest.
I'm saying.
But, I mean, that does not sound like fun. But I know that other people do want to do it, and I love
Yeah.
that for them. But yeah, that these are actual people who are
Mm,
talking about things that they've done. So whether that's a health diagnosis that they're working through, whether it's a story of something that happened to them. Because one of the ways to categorize the stories is some of them are decisions that people made, like I changed my major in school, I quit
Yeah.
my job. Um, Others are when people react to things that happened to them. My spouse died unexpectedly. I was in a car accident unexpectedly. The
Yeah.
world shut down and I had to stay home for a year. That one we all had.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those stories and to hear how other people
Yeah.
have innovatively problem sourced them.
Yeah. And I guess I'm gonna try and bridge that innovatively problem solving or sourcing. How do you keep up the momentum for your podcast?
Uh,
Any
so
any
it has been so part of the story. It's good that part of the reason I was able to do this is that is that my I had less coaching appointments
Okay.
than I had for a while. Like, so I had open time in my schedule.
Yeah.
And so that is a piece of the story. How is Amy able to do all of
Yeah.
these things? And that's just the reality of what my schedule was like. I'm also about to be an empty nester, so I'm not running around chasing small children right now. So I do have time.
Mhm.
And so that meant that I had time on my calendar to see what I would do. And I just committed to, there's a big year in online business and in business overall.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
big push about anti-hustle and don't do these things. And that's fair, right? But I also am a believer that sometimes if you want to get an extraordinary result, you sometimes need to sort of ask yourself, am I willing to do something that is a little extra? And so I put myself in a position where I was like, let's see what I can do. And
Mm.
let's find out what critical mass is and how many of these I can do and how fast.
Wow. And I was gonna ask what's one way you've changed because of this project, but I also kind of wanna putting yourself in creating that space for you to find that critical mass. How do you think you've changed, or is it too soon to?
It might be too soon, actually. That's a really good thing. So I will say, like once a month, periodically on a schedule, I sit down, I sort of look at my own sort of strengths and how I think it's going and what I'm trying to create. And I do have at the backside of this, I do have a very big pie in the sky dream of what I hope to be able to build on a couple of different levels.
Yeah, yeah.
And I am one of those people that I would love it to happen as fast as possible.
Mm,
Never quite as fast as I think it should go, but it's actually going very quickly. And so I have to remind myself of that. But I am surprised at how much I've been able to accomplish.
wow. Yeah.
I'm very, very pleased. Part of this is that there are some tools that I found along the way that are able to do pieces of this that
Yeah.
make it much faster.
Mm.
And that's phenomenal. And I am at the critical mass where I'm looking to begin to build
I
team to produce it. But that comes with the thing that it has to actually be making, money to pay all the people. And so that's the next wave of it. That's the next wave of it. And so how have I changed? I don't know how to answer that actually. I think that, I mean, I would like to say that I'm the same person that I've always been and that this hasn't changed me at all, but I don't know that that's true. I think that one of the things that has definitely changed is as I've done this, I've become much more comfortable in me being the voice of what this is and how I want it to be assembled and that's helpful as I begin to bring people on and teach them because there's many, many people who would like to say, well, we think you should do it this way. So,
Mm,
like when I was talking to people about the initial concept, instead of adult, many, many people wanted me to use the word parent or they wanted me to use the word mom. And I
oh,
had to go back and say, I do see what you're saying. But one of the things that I think is very strange about modern times is that we put a sort of a value judgment
mm,
on the classification of whether or not you raise children. And I think that's weird, mostly because almost half of society doesn't do it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was like, yeah, like definitely a lot of the stories are related to, the job of parenting or caregiving, but
Mm,
I didn't want to be the person who was like, you can only come through the door if you're a mom or a parent.
yeah. Wow, that's so pivotal. And I had a question. I don't want to lose it. Um, oh And once I say it, it's like flying.
It's out there in the ether. Where did
Out
it
there.
go?
Yeah. No, I think it was around, and then having that voice, like being able to stand on your own ground and say that, was that already there, do you think, or it's just been amplified, or has it changed that quality?
Oh, there have been parts of my life where that was defined in other things. So I had practiced that in other spaces. I definitely think that it is absolutely something that can be really, really scary. There have
Mm,
been times when so that's something that I've gotten stronger about over the year. When I'm not sure about the opinion I have, I'm not necessarily as like bossy about it, because I'm not sure. So if I walk into a room and somebody says, "What do you feel about this?" and I'm like, "I don't actually know what we're talking about," so I try to really be like, "I don't know. What do you know? Why don't you tell me?" And then I'll share with you. But then there are other things that I feel pretty confident that my opinion is my opinion and I'm fine speaking up about it. So, like, one of the things that, like, many, many people in the United States of America have a very, very faith-based life and they are
mm,
members of religious congregations and all of it. That's great. It's totally good. But I have this sort of thing where I'm like, if you have a faith-based business,
mm,
I like to know about that in advance. I think it's very, very helpful to say that in advance because then I know, like Hobby Lobby, they're right there with it,
yeah.
right? This is this, we have this. And I'm like, yay, I have a lot of respect for that. That's one of the reasons to start your own business so that you can stamp it with your own morals and values. And so many, many years ago, I released a podcast that I was like, I think that if you are running a faith-based business, you should say that up front. And
Yeah.
when I released that, Raquel, I was afraid I was going to be smited. I was like, I was like
Oh,
waiting for the lightning to come and hit me on my desk. Didn't happen. But I mean, I don't think that, I don't think it's that controversial of an opinion. I
no.
think it's very helpful to tell people.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just transparency, and that might just be one of my core values. Yeah.
Yeah, and what happens, I will say, is people will think they're being transparent, but they don't realize that they're not. And that's just the way life is. That's not
People,
people being bad. Yeah.
people. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to kind of start to wrap up with some other reflection pieces. What do you, and we talked a little bit about future. So what do you hope? And if you don't want to share or tease it out to people, then that's fine. We just keep it under wraps. But what do you hope that the next either 100 episodes or that this podcast in general becomes
Oh,
in,
so yeah. So I am a person if you tell me to dream big,
oh gosh.
sometimes I can really do it, right? So even before this launched, I came downstairs one day and I was like, my family was there, and I was like, so I want to talk about buying a building. And then like the people in my family were just like, "Oh my God, what are you talking about? You even put this out." So I would love for this to grow into something that is bigger, and in a lot of ways. I do think there's a question that underlines this that we don't really. I don't have an answer, and I don't think anybody does actually. The way that people consume information and the way they search for information is rapidly changing.
Yeah.
But there's a problem that needs to be solved, and I've been talking about it in small circles for a long time, which is that there's more information than there ever has been before. And it's harder to get the information we're looking for than it ever has been before. And this is exacerbated on a local level. So I'm about to take a trip out to the West Coast. I can Google, you know, dune buggies in Oregon and find that information. But
Yeah.
if I want to know about construction happening on my street,
Mm,
that's harder to find. And it's really,
mm,
really weird. And
mm,
so there's that. The other thing that's happening, and that's a problem, right? Because you have businesses who want to promote and people who want to shop, and they're not matching up.
yes.
And so that should resolve some way. I'm not going to solve that problem because I don't even know. But
No,
the
right.
other thing that is going on is that for the first time in, let's say, pretty close to 100 years,
Mm,
new research just showed that 83% of Americans have streaming. They're on streaming accounts for information and entertainment, but only 30% are connected with cable and broadcast. And so and I think you could match that out for Hollywood things. So the
Mm,
gatekeepers who are curating the big pieces of content and the way we deliver things, that
mm,
system has shifted. Like it has flipped. And there are new networks, right, who've stepped up. Apple, Netflix, on the podcasting side, you've got Amazon and Wondery and Sirius. Those people who are producing things and they're growing those things. But it's not done yet. The switch is not complete because we still have like the people who are on TV went into those other places. The people who were in Hollywood went onto the streaming platforms. And so there's a gap that I think is going to progress. And I don't know how it's going to resolve,
mm.
but to be a part of that, to be providing something that is there and is creating this variety of information and talk show format stuff for people who are curious about personal development, I'd love to be there.
Yes, no, I love, and that's what for those, well, nobody knows me here. Well, I don't know. But I also didn't think I was gonna get into podcasts because I thought it was so saturated and I thought there was so many. But on the flip side, when I still drive, I don't commute as much, but when I drive, I still go to my radio and I think, oh my gosh, radio has been since I don't know how long. And I think it's
Since the 1830s, yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, it's comforting to some extent that there are these main staples that just carry people through, or that through line, or I don't know. There's just pieces that, um,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
and I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like.
yeah,
I really, really don't. But I mean, audio, if
mm,
audio has been even before, if you back up, like, so audio through radio waves,
yeah,
that's one thing. But if you back it up a way, way, way long ago,
yeah,
people orating and talking
yeah,
goes back to forever, like
yeah,
storytelling as a way of carrying things on. But we
yeah,
use it differently. We use it differently than ever before. And you can now, like, if you are a person who wants to, I mean, just insert, you want to join a Bible study, you want to
yeah,
research, Buddhism, you want to learn about knitting socks on Tuesday
yeah,
evenings, or, how to dye wool
yeah,
purple. And you're on an airplane, you can search and come up with that and choose your method. Do you want to read it? Do you want to watch it? And do you want to listen to it? And
mm,
I think that that's really powerful. I think that anytime, I will say this, is you said saturated. I think
mm,
anytime anybody tells me don't do this because it's too
um,
saturated, I take two things out of that. One, that person is selling advice on how to do something. That's the
mm,
only time anybody ever says that,
that's true.
right? And the second thing is that I just have this thing. It's like, well, how do you know?
Yeah,
Like, how do you know? Because it doesn't matter. I mean, it does, right? Podcasting is, well, the gatekeepers are gone. You can write a
yeah,
book now for free,
for free.
right? It was, if you have to pay, like back in the old days, if you wanted to make, well, even today, what does it cost to make a movie? $300 million or something ridiculous. You got to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Record an audio message on your phone and update it to Spotify. That's a $0 investment. So,
That's right. That's right. Accessibility and that's the thing why I decided to do a podcast just for the fun of it without the intention, without a clear expectation because I love how the technology is overlapping, the global north, the global south. People
yes.
can just have an old piece of tech, old iPhone or whatever it is. No, it's amazing. And I guess to wrap it up, what's something that about you or about this podcast that your listeners should know, or it might be nice to know, but they don't know?
So this one totally stumped me.
Oh
This was such a good question.
no.
Like, and I was like, oh my God, what is the thing that people like? I mean, I just am like, there are pieces of my life, like we talked about, that are off limits for the show. Like, and I'm pretty upfront with people about those boundaries. I worry sometimes that I talk too much about like locations, of
Um,
where I am and stuff like that. That's one of the things that I'm like, eh. But I was really, really thinking about this and I was like, wow, what are the things that people should
mm,
know about me that they
mm,
don't know? And I was like, I don't know. I have to like, I was like, am I mean, I don't know. There have to be things. I mean, I don't know. I'm usually barefoot when I'm recording the
Oh,
podcast.
oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, same. Yeah.
So there's that. I brush my teeth before every single episode.
Okay.
I don't know why.
It just emits a cleanliness.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And the last question, how would you describe the energy or medicine of this season of the podcast and or of your life that you're creating this podcast from?
I love this question. I love this question. And I think that because I would never have asked it for myself and I
Mhm.
wouldn't have thought about it as what I was doing. And I think I mentioned it earlier before the concept of like, or maybe I didn't, maybe it was another conversation I had today, the concept of like an avalanche or a snowball. Like, so really,
Mm.
really expansive. Like, I am hoping that what I'm trying to do with my life and with the stories I'm telling and the ideas I'm sharing, that they start with a word or two or a conversation between me and you, and they grow and they spread on their own. And so that would be like, really expansive and with volume and momentum of their own.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, those were all my questions, unless I need to brainstorm. What's your favorite color? No.
Those are those. That's I was wondering. I was like, oh, what? Will somebody do the three questions for me? No, that would be that's one of the reasons. It's like I come up with those, and
Yeah.
I answer them for myself. Like there's everybody knows all my little answers to those goofy little questions. Like what's your movie candy, Amy?
Yes.
That's question flaps, by the way, because nobody goes to the movies anymore.
Uh,
But no, these have been great, Raquel. This was a great experience, and I had fun talking about it. And I appreciate you pushing me.
no, thank you for having me. This was great. I've never co-hosted and interviewed the host, so this was spectacular. This is awesome, and thank you for having me. Honestly, appreciate it.
Same. Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself. Head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adultier adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.